Greetings, this is the overview, and I'm your host, Brother Mbogo. Today I'm going to take a look at the family and this notion or idea of abolishing the family that has extended down from, we say, more ancient ideas from the Illuminati up until you look at socialism and communism and the new feminist ideas of abolishing the family. What I'll be looking at basically is the source of this, what could be construed as a source. And this goes back to the Illuminati again. I did a program about the Illuminati last time. This time I'm looking at the Illuminati, but specifically in aspects to how their perceptions of the family are, or how they originated their concepts of abolishing the family and their narratives about the wider society, the so-called global community. So that's what I'll be looking at today. So I'll start by looking at some of the concepts around the Illuminati that they had during the early days, although they didn't last that long actually. It was abandoned or abolished after around just over 10 years. It began in 1776 and was abolished in 1785 or 86. But it abolished officially, but it continued under different names. You could argue it has continued up until the present day because some of those organizations that were formed as disguises for the Illuminati still exist today. Anyway, take a look at some of these concepts around the Illuminati. Thomas Campanella, an Italian philosopher, writer, and astrologer, a member of the Dominican Order, his most famous work was the utopian fantasy, The City of the Sun, in which he imagines a communist state. Anyway, an ideal republic professing a natural religion directed by universal laws, ruled by a philosopher priest. Campanella calls the head of the state the king's son. He is assisted by three ministers: power, wisdom, and love. In this republic, all property and private homes and family are abolished. Not surprisingly, Campanella was required reading for Illuminati initiates. So those who were being initiated into the Illuminati had to read this book by this Campanella, a book which talked about the communist state and ideas that had ideas around abolishing the family and private property and homes. So let me continue. This is from a book that I was looking at last time about the Illuminati. It provided an extensive documentation of those who joined the Illuminati and what happened to the Illuminati after it was abolished in Germany and how it continued in secret after that. And this one relates to the similarities between the concepts of this Adam Weishaupt, the one who started the Illuminati, and people like Karl Marx. Peggy Palowski, who wrote her PhD thesis on Weishaupt and the pedagogy of the Illuminati, seems to agree in nearly all his writings. Weishaupt exhibits an extensive interest in social issues, having a developed sense of problematic and social situations and processes. At the very least, she asserts similar findings with respect to the condition of and relationship of man within society. Connect Weishaupt and the founder of communism. The material in Weishaupt's later writings, in particular, clearly describe the phenomenon which Marx later classified as class antagonisms and class conflicts. So those ideas, the similarities between the two thinkers, between Marx and this Adam Weishaupt of the Illuminati, can lead someone to think that maybe Karl Marx, who came later on, did read some of what he did, some of the works of Weishaupt. But this is just an example of what was taking place at the time. And in terms of the feminists, I'll be talking about feminism or the feminist ideas later on in a short while. Mary Wollstonecraft is another person. She's one of the founding thinkers of feminism. So both Mary and Claire, her sister, apparently received Barrow's readings from Shelley Mary had expressly recorded in her journal that they had read specifically about the Illuminati. So they read about the Illuminati and some of their concepts, in which it's quite obvious that they adopted some of the thinkings of the Illuminati. Anyway, carrying on. In terms of Illuminati thinking towards the family and society, we really beheld patriotism generating localism. The idea that patriotism is focused on a local society, and I'll be detailing what that means as I read. The confined spirit of families, and at length egoism. So there's a connection between the family, patriotism, and being egotistic. That's what it's trying to say. Hence, the origin of states and governments and of civil society has really proved to be the seeds of discord. So the idea of having states, governments, families being patriotic is creating a discord in the global society. And patriotism has found its punishment in itself reject that of love of country, and mankind will once more learn to. So if you forget the love of country and patriotism, mankind will once more learn to know and love each other as men. So rather than focusing on your particular group, as his argument goes, you focus on the broader global community. Partiality being cast aside, that union of arts will once more appear and expand itself. On the contrary, extend the bonds of patriotism, and you will teach man that it is impossible to blame the closer contraction of love to a single family, to a single person, in a word, to the strictest egotism. So focusing on family and the single person, and the smaller group or nation state or so forth, as I said, they see it as something egotistical. What is clearly represented in these doctrines, especially the rejection of nationalism and patriotism, is the seeds of modern political ideology, which espouses the creation of a one-world government or the design of a new world order. The Bavarian Illuminati defined themselves, and rightly so, as heads of the machinery directing a union of secret associations for the purpose of world domination. So they want to dominate the world by creating a global government. This is something that I think most people that have read something about the Illuminati are very familiar with. But looking at the communism and its relation to the Illuminati and also to the aspects of the family. So what I'll be looking at here are the connections between the Illuminati and communism. So this Filippo Michele Buonarroti is one of those who are individuals whose life is interesting, as myths are told about him in regards to the perfecting of secret society. So his works, basically, which I'm going to mention, were read by, he was a member of the Illuminati, and his works were read by the communist thinkers of the day, people like Marx and Engels. A direct line of influence from the Illuminati to the French Revolution to the Communist League of Justice is realized in this single individual. So this is just about his background, where he grew up and where he went to school at Pisa. He became a Freemason and moved to Florence. And historian Carlo Frankovich is satisfied that in 1786, Buonarroti also joined the Illuminati Lodge in Florence. So this is when he joined the Illuminati in 1786. For 6 years he stayed in Brussels, and it was here that he finally wrote what would be his most lasting and influential legacy. It's a book called The Conspiracy of Equals. And this book is considered to be, by many, to be the Bible of 19th century socialists and revolutionaries. And it goes on to say, his manual, this all-important revolutionary manual, was read and possessed by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, and they almost put it into production. They almost put into production a German edition. So basically, this Buonarroti, his book was read by Marx and Engels, and it's clear that he was a member of the Illuminati. So that's where the influence on Marxism comes from in terms of its connection to the Illuminati. And the communist idea of the family now, the aims of communist society are quite different. Communist society sees that the old type of family is breaking up, and that all the old pillars which supported the family as a social unit are being removed. The domestic economy is dying. They're looking at the economic circumstances around how the family was structured, and they're saying basically that because those structures are changing, that the structure of the family will also change and decline. The domestic economy is dying, and working class parents are unable to take care of their children or provide them with sustenance and education. And it's going on to talk about capitalism. And because capitalism has changed all of this, all that was formerly produced in the bosom of the family is now being manufactured on mass scale in workshops and factories. The machine has superseded the wife. What housekeeper would now bother to make candles spin, or spin wool, or weave cloth? Which of course all of these have been moved to the fact that basically the structure of what you might call indigenous societies has changed. A lot of the work that the woman would do around the house or in the local community has now been moved to factories. I think that's why the Western thinking around the family has also changed, even though some argue that in Western society it is mainly the wealthy that married the poorer classes. Marriage wasn't such a big thing. Thus the family economy is gradually being deprived of all the domestic work without which our grandmothers could hardly have imagined their family. What was formerly produced in the family is now produced by the collective labor of working men and women in the factories. So basically it's saying that the communist idea of the family says that the family has changed because, well, it has changed in a sense, because the economic structures or the economic work that family members used to do is no longer done at home. It's now done in the factories. So the role of women has, you could almost argue the role of women in the family has diminished to the extent that maybe that's why Western industrialization has changed the nature of society. Even though if you look at the role within global South societies, people can still continue with the roles of women and the female in certain instances. Even though, yes, women are now working in those societies in a wider role in business and in government and so forth. But the world is not that simple. The arguments that are made in the Western world about the family and the way the family should be or used to be and is now is not the same as if you look at some West African societies, for example, where the woman has always worked and been able to own property, when the European woman at one time couldn't own property and they didn't really go out to work. They were stuck mainly in domestic roles. So concepts of reality and the family are different in different parts of the world. So some of the arguments that are made in the West, which are, you could argue, are being adopted by African or women in the global South, even though their circumstances have been different, or their history has been different to the European. In terms of feminists, this is some of the feminist ideas of the family, and the feminist ideas are focused mainly on competition between, so-called competition between the male role and the female role in the family. And this idea that the male has always been more dominant in the family in these so-called patriarchal societies in the West, but in other regions of the world, the matriarchal role is more dominant. So this is from Kate Millett, one of the more recent, you might call a radical feminist Patriarchy's chief institution is the family. It is both a mirror of and connection with the larger society, a patriarchal unit within a patriarchal whole, mediating between the individual and the social structure. The family affects control and conformity where political and other authorities are insufficient. And continuing, it's a book called Sexual Politics from 1968 by this Cade Millett. The chief contribution of the family in patriarchy is the socialization of the young into patriarchal ideologies, prescribed attitudes towards the categories of role, temperament, and status. While we may niggle over the balance of authority between the personalities of various households, one must remember that the entire culture supports masculine authority in all areas of life, and outside of the home permits the female none at all. So it's basically saying that the man is dominant in the home and outside, because it's saying that the women have no role outside of the home. But one thing that they forget about when it comes to the role of the man and the woman, they forget about the nature of the man, the spiritual nature of the man, the spiritual nature of the woman. And the woman is more internal, so the behaviors of woman are naturally going to be different from that of a man. A woman is supposed to be more nurturing and the man is more, but the man will basically do more of the outside work. Although in traditional societies you'll find that in some of these societies women are the ones who build the homes. In some of these indigenous societies, that is basically construction work, whereas the man will go out and get involved in the more broader community-based projects, although both parties will be involved in agriculture. So, look at this. In radical feminism, one of the solutions is hard political lesbianism and separatism. Moderate avoid traditional family relations. So according to the feminist idea, to the extreme, they will even avoid getting married and stay away from relationships with men. And looking at some of the solutions to these issues with the idea that the family structure has changed. In communism, I'm reading from a text called Communism and the Family. There is no escaping the fact the old type of family has to add its day. The family is withering away, not because it is being forcibly destroyed by the state, but because the family is ceasing to be a necessity. The state does not need the family because the domestic economy is no longer profitable. The family distracts the worker from more useful and productive labor. The members of the family do not need the family either, because the task of bringing up children, which was formerly theirs, is passing more and more into the hands of the collective. That is the state. So they want the broader community or the state to take over running of the nurturing of the children. So the influence of communist thinking on the family, it will transform the relations between the sexes into purely private matters, which concerns only the persons involved, and into which society has no occasion to intervene. It can do this since it does away with private property and educates children on a communal basis, and in this way removes the two bases of traditional marriage. The dependence is rooted in private property of the women on the man and of the children on the parents. That's the communist ideology, I think. But even today I think this is the basis of the Western education system, where the state takes over the education of the children, whereas in other societies, more traditional societies, it was parents that were more involved in the education of the children, but when the state takes over. But then again, you could argue that it frees the parents to go out and work. Maybe that's part of the capitalist system, to have such a situation where children are educated by the state, which frees up parents to commit more time to labor so that corporations can make more money. But then again, they'll make more money from children when they grow up. And anyway, this is the radical feminist solutions to gender equality, All these ideas, as I said, stem from the notion of the breaking down the family and creating a different type of society. So feminists, to some extent, in their thinking were shaped by the idea that the family needs to be broken down, or the family is breaking down. Radical feminists advocate for the abolition of the traditional patriarchal nuclear family and the establishment of alternative family structures and sexual relations. The various alternatives suggested by radical feminists include separation, women-only communes, the matrifocal households. Some extreme radical feminists also practice political lesbianism and political celibacy, as they view heterosexual female relations with men as sleeping with the enemy. So radical feminists want to turn away from men completely. As we all know, we've probably all heard of these things. And the last two parts is looking at solutions again, their conceptions of what the solution should be to this issue of what's happening with the family. Well, you could argue that it's not only happening in Western societies, because throughout the world, societies have been accepting or accommodating Western perceptions of the world through organizations like the United Nations, and the Western concept of rights has infiltrated most societies throughout the world. So people may not realize, but their way of thinking has changed due to wanting to be part of this so-called global community. Today, as a result of changes in the structure of modern capitalism, the majority of bourgeois families are no longer organized around production but around consumption. Thus, even within capitalism, the economic function of the family is diminishing. The phenomenon usually described as the dissolution of the family or crisis of the family form are probably connected to this change. So these are the phenomena, what they say is the phenomena of the issues around the family breaking apart. The end of monogamy, in the strict sense, is universally accepted, although some attention has been paid to its socially negative characteristics. You can see this is mainly a Western perception of what the family was, because they're talking about monogamy as if it's the normal type of family that existed in history. The most dramatic manifestation of this phenomenon was the suggestion in Sweden and Denmark to legally abolish marriage as an institution. Now, number two, in terms of these phenomena around the family decline, the almost complete elimination and the de facto reduction of male authority in marriage. This is the connection to so-called women's emancipation, the gradual widening of the circle of occupations open to women, the achievements of political equality by women. This particular section, if you look at online and you see the discussions that are taking place, you see that in the Western world in particular, there's a crisis considering around what the role of a man is and manhood, and the role of the male in society. They think that feminism, or men have become effeminized because they've been emasculated. Anything that a man says or does as a man is criticized and seen as negative in society. So men in many Western countries, and well, I wouldn't say the whole of men, but there is a discussion going on about the role of men in Western societies. And number three, the transformation of moral norms relating to sexuality, which improves the situation of women and is connected to increases in divorce. That one I'm not going to touch on. The practical disappearance of the multi-generational family, the narrowing of the family to the nuclear family. In Western societies for a long time that has been taking place, where the family is just basically the parents and children, the grandparents and great-grandparents. In the Western societies have been neglected for a while. So the smaller family unit is what the modern world sees as what the family should be. The grandparents are, they still exist within the family, but they don't play a predominant role as they used to. For example, when parents had to work, it was the grandparents that looked after the children. But in this contemporary society, it's childcare, well, also the fact that families are broken down to the extent that you have a lot of one-parent families, so this idea of grandparents coming on the scene, or parents are divorced, or they have not such a strong connection to their own parents, their children don't see their grandparents as, or get involved with their grandparents as much. So that role of grandparents teaching the children also has declined. This is the solution. This is the last part about solutions. A solution to the problem is possibly only through a radical transformation of the family. What criteria must be met by the new family structure? It must be a democratically structured community which allows the early learning of democratic propensities. This is a communist idea. It must guarantee many-sided human relations, including those between children and adults. Is that talking about breaking down how children are supposed to relate to their parents? It must guarantee the development and realization of individuality. The basic precondition of this is the free choosing and re-choosing of human ties, even in childhood. So in this, it gives the impression that this is saying that how children relate to adults and their parents has to change from the traditional high respect for their parents to one where children look at themselves more as individuals than members of a family, or children of parents that are supposed to behave in a particular way. It must eliminate both the conflicts originating in monogamy and those originating in its dissolution. This is the type of solution to be sought in the new type of family, which we will call the commune. So they're looking at a commune in this communist idea, or the socialist idea, is a community where you don't have the so-called monogamous family. You have the whole society looking after children. Children don't belong to their particular parents, to their parents or birth parents. They belong to the community. So there's no organized structure of families. Even families working together is not there. You don't even have those individual families in the society. What you have is people who give birth to children, and the children are raised by the community as a whole. This is part of this idea of the global community, where there are no families. It's just somehow communes, where the individual's dedication is to the global world rather than dedication to their parents and their relatives, which is the natural structure of a society. Just because you have some dedication to your parents and your family member, it doesn't mean that you're going to be against the rest of the society. This is the narrative that they're trying to portray, that because you're connected to your parents and other family members, that you're going to somehow be against, you're going to be somehow disrupted to the rest of society, that there's no strong social bond between the society because your focus is on your family and your relatives. So there's now, if you get rid of family and relatives, or you break that structure down so you're not focused so much on family and relatives, you can be more focused on a broader society. But it sounds theoretically okay, but in reality you can't be dedicated to both. A person who's raised properly or lives properly, although they're dedicated to family, they still have a high respect for the society that they live in and the global. There are certain morals, you might argue, that a person has which ensures that they treat the rest of the society in a particular way. You don't need to be torn away from the family to be able to have that dedication to the broader society, as the communist mindset or the Western mindset seems to indicate. Anyway, that's to look at this concept of the family and the idea around abolishing the family, and why those ideas developed through the Illuminati up until through the communist ideas, and to some aspect the feminist concepts of the world, and also even this Western liberalist mindset of focusing on the individual rather than the family, and breaking down that family structure, which is more of a traditional way of looking at the world as opposed to this modern way in which materialism and the individual seems to take more importance than the I wouldn't say communist, the communal lifestyle that traditional societies still have to some extent. Anyway, that's it for now.